The first Harry Potter novel was published. Bill Clinton began his second term as president. Bop by Hanson, top of the charts. And Men in Black was released. It was 1997. I was 20 years old. Now I'm 30. And I'm here. The concept for this show was quite easy. I've been doing solo shows for the past 10 years. I've been performing for 22 years. And I thought I would take one piece from each of the past 10 years and put it into a show. Seemed easy enough. Anyway, the idea was quite simple. But I have to tell you, this is maybe one of the hardest things I've ever done. Watching all the old videos from 10 years ago, seeing what I put my family and friends through when I was up on stage experimenting. And nevertheless, trying to remember what I did 10 years ago. So this will be an interesting evening, to say the least. One thing that I found to be a challenge when creating this work tonight was that it wasn't going to be a greatest hits kind of show. And so some of the things we will experience together tonight will be a bit like taking medicine or some vitamins, you know. Maybe it doesn't taste so good, but maybe it's good for you, and then in the end you get better and you're not sick anymore, and then you're happier than when you were taking the medicine. So, but it will make us stronger by the end of tonight. There was a certain problem to pick material from the past 10 years, not for lack of material. I've produced and performed in over 40 different shows from the past 10 years, so it wasn't for lack of something to do up here tonight for you, but there seems to be an odd strength to my shows in such a way that the only reason you like to watch my show is because something else is going to happen very soon. And what this means is that if I take a little piece of the show out, it doesn't really stand on its own. I don't work so well on the sound bites or the little 5-minute act. So tonight's going to be very strange for me, I think. But don't worry, there's 10 things. You can count along with me, and when we get around to number 8, you'll be quite relieved. 2 more left. But when I was, just a little bit brief history, and then we'll jump right in. I started unicycling when I was the age of 8, and I started juggling when I was age 9. And when I was in my early teens, I was doing street shows. I was doing juggling apples and knives and comedy and such as people do here in America. And yet I always knew I liked juggling for some different reason, but I couldn't articulate it. And then when I was 18 years old, I saw dance for the first time in my life. And I can't say that I particularly liked dancing or watching it, but other people did. And it made me think, why? They're not doing any tricks. Just moving around the stage. How easy is that? At the time I thought this, so. But it made me think about what I was doing and that people could appreciate movement for what it was. So I had my genius thought at the time was, aha, but wait a second, I'm juggling and I'm also moving my body through space. It just also happens to be moving other objects along with it. This was my very clever idea when I was 18 years old. So it made me realize that actually I enjoy juggling for how it looks instead of how hard of a trick it is. For example, 7-ball juggling, I think it's a great trick, but I'm not so impressed by the skill it takes. I'm more impressed by the shape or the pattern it makes in the air. And that's kind of an example for all the work that followed since then. I did go to dance school, incidentally, for a year and a half before I quit. Not as easy as it looked. But actually, I went to dance school to be a better juggler, and it turned out that I needed to spend my time juggling instead of dancing to be a better juggler. Again, good, clever. So I'm here tonight to share these lessons with you for the younger people in the crowd. You don't have to suffer through the same things. All right, 1997. When I graduated high school, I started a theater company up in South Portland, Maine at the Celebration Barn Theater. And it was, among other people, it was with Michael Menez, who was in the company for all of one day. Then the next week, moving on, but we had a little company with Michael Menez and Fritz Groba and Morty Hansen. And Michael wanted to name the company Quest, something like this. And so we had this company for about a year and a half. Michael, unfortunately, had other projects he couldn't join us with. But after this company found its ending, natural ending, time to move on to the next project, I was alone. And now we jump into the 10 years ago, doing shows alone, solo, on stage. So I was 20 years old and really a lot more ambitious than I ever should have been if I would sit down and think about it. And I was going to do a one-man, one-hour show alone on stage, and it was going to be great. And so I was very over-enthusiastic about this. And it ended up being 2 hours long instead of 1 hour. And I had a couple of dancers and a drummer and some other friends with me. And it was my first show, and I decided to call it Quest in honor of Michael Menez and working with him for one day. And it was a bit of a grand statement in my mind back then, so I called the show Quest. Also in 1997, I met several people that would influence me up until today and hopefully into the future. One of those people was Ocean Kalin, who also designed my website. I'm sure you're keeping track of all this, taking notes. Oh, the website, right. And so he actually made a lot of music for me and also juggling with me, but the biggest thing that he started was a thing we called The Collective, which was in Minneapolis for about 5 years, and we produced, 20 different shows together with The Collective, different work. We would meet and rehearse straight for 3 days with no sleep, and then we would do a week long of shows, and we did this 3 or 4 times a year. And this was a great opportunity for me to start to make work, and then make more work and more work and more work. And so the next piece I would like to do is from 1997, and it was only performed once at the show Quest. And maybe you'll see why.
Welcome. Well, Michael covered that. Okay, so you took all my best material. How cute was the mom? My mom was going to come here, and that was great. All right. Well, we are here at a school tonight, and I know a lot of the time I spent in school was basically goofing off. I learned a lot of really good tricks sitting in biology class, and spinning and balancing on a chair on 2 legs, and lots of good things, parts of the body, I'm sure, too. But yeah, I like to goof off, and I know that there's some people here in the room tonight that are probably really good at goofing off during class. Like, maybe even in the 3rd row, I don't know. But I'm looking for a very particular person to help me out tonight. A very particular form of goofing off. I wonder if anybody here tonight is good at making paper airplanes. Yeah? You're good at making paper airplanes? You want to come up here and help me out? All right, big round of applause. Thanks a lot. I appreciate your enthusiastic response there. What's your name?
Steven.
Steven, thanks for coming out. How many years have you been making paper airplanes? Okay, but you're pretty good. Okay, great. Well, I'm excited. I hope this will be okay to demonstrate your skills. Yeah. Okay, if you just want to take a couple minutes, just go ahead, maybe down here on the floor. Go ahead and make a paper airplane. Just take your time. We got a long night, so it's Wow, and you're done. That's really nice. You're fast. Have you been practicing or? Why don't you just go ahead and stand right over here and face the audience, please. Are you gonna throw it? You're gonna throw it with your right hand. Yeah. Is that how you usually throw it? Okay, good choice. All right. Don't move yet. Okay. All right, go for it. Yeah, go. Yeah, okay, that was interesting. We're going for the green ring. We're going for the paper airplane through the green ring. Oh, okay. Sorry. Okay, where's the airplane? Okay, maybe we can you get it back? Actually, shouldn't make airplanes like that. It's really dangerous. All right, the green ring. Yeah. Okay, go for it. Okay. Well, go ahead and why don't you? Oh yeah, try. Okay, try it. Okay, wait. Okay. Yeah. Oh, well. Why don't you make another paper airplane? Can you just make another one? That one doesn't work so well. There's some paper by the desk there. Just go ahead and make another one. Are you done yet? Can't really see. Are you about ready? Are you ready? 1, 2, 3. Yeah, okay. That was my fault. I'm sorry. Drop it. All right. Green. Let's see if it fits. Do you think this is going to fit? Yeah. Okay. I don't know. All right. Why don't I help you out? I'm going to help you out. Okay, make it a little easier. All right. Because there's a lot of stuff flying around. Okay, but you're doing good. All right. You just have to believe. So I'm going to actually separate the green ring from the other rings, okay? So it'll be easier. Okay, so 1, 2, 3. Okay. We can try some other stuff. I don't know. No. Okay. That's not going to help. Maybe 4 rings? 4 rings? Is this good? No, it's not. Okay. Tell you what. Okay, wait. Tell you what are we trying to do here? Right, get it through the green ring. Right. Okay. Tell you what. That was a really good try. Tell you what. Come up here. Put the ring in the green. What? Put the airplane in my mouth. But don't throw it. You can walk up and put it in my mouth. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, and Steven. The airplane through the green ring.
Technology stuff, I turned it off. We didn't have microphones back in 1997. Now that went a lot better than it did 10 years ago. Thanks a lot. You should have, we were there for days. It was so boring. All right. Well, 1998, I made a sequel to the show Quest. It was called Question. Thank you. I'll be here all night. Enjoy the meal. But actually, it was kind of interesting because I had made the show Quest in 1997, and it was a great learning experience for me. And the next year, I thought, well, what am I going to do now? How do I top that? And I thought, well, at least I can try to do it again. And so, Question was, and this trend of trying to do it all again has kind of been in the past few years in my work, that every year make a lot of new work, and I really enjoy the process of making new work, and that's what keeps me going, so that's what I do. And a lot of things started to happen in 1998 from this first show. And the first one was kind of a articulation of the concept behind the work. For example, that since the juggling was a lot more interesting for me visually than the skill, we started to try to make the work stand out, the props stand out from the performer. So the first thing we did away with was the flashy costume with the sequins and the suspenders and the bow ties, and all these things that dressed up the performer. And what we really wanted to try to do was to get to a place where the audience could see the props. And to this end, I think we failed miserably, because our idea was that we would wear street clothes all the time. But the problem is that when people come to a theater, they have certain expectations. There's going to be seats, there's going to be a stage, there'll be a performer, things are going to happen like this. And one thing that's going to happen is they have a list. Oh, there's a costume, yes, check. There's a music, check. There's choreography, check, like this. And as soon as you come on stage in street clothes, people go, costume? Oh, what? Wait, they're wearing street clothes. And they actually notice it more than I think if we were wearing all gold lame. I haven't tested this, but I think so. But what we wanted to try to start to do was to take the costume away, to make the performer not so much invisible, but not the main focus of the work, because for us the interesting part was the juggling. It was what the props were doing. And to that end as well, we started to use music that was contemporary of the time, pop music. And the reason behind this is that traditionally when people talk about juggling, at least in America, say in the 70s and 80s when I was growing up, the standard deal would be to use some jazz music, no vocals, or some classical music, or something like this. And also a tuxedo, and it's kind of the standard image of a juggler or an entertainer. I mean, the reason people were using jazz music and juggling is because that was contemporary of their time, when they were, you know, back in way back last century. And so actually, if you want to really copy the jugglers of the past in all the old books with all the old photos, what you would do is use Britney Spears. In fact, because jazz music was contemporary to their time, Britney Spears was contemporary to our time. So even if you didn't like Britney, you were kind of stuck with it. This also led to composition of routines, where routines were composed along to the music and had the same structure and flow of the music. And this has changed in recent years, and I hope you'll see that later tonight. But a lot of the compositions ended up taking these little 4-minute sound bites, because that's what was being played on the radio. Again, all these things that we were trying to do, we sat around for hours thinking about these things, but of course then in the end the result is some punk kid wearing jeans and sneakers listening to Britney Spears on stage, and people, you know, thinking that you're just very unprofessional. So that was really fun for everybody. That was great. But also in 1998, Ocean, who I mentioned before, he started working a lot with children's toys, which has also spilled over into my work in recent years. And the first children's toy piece that we did was we went out and bought 5 alphabet Elmos, and then we made them sing in a round. So we would press 1 and wait until it got to E, and then we would press the next one, and then like this. So it was the start of the work, and but it wasn't the end. So that was good. We started playing around with toys in 1998. 4-hour-long show. Because what do you do after a 2-hour-long show? You do a 4-hour-long show. We had a 1-hour pre-show. I had 8 different jugglers with me. We did the show 2 times. So we had a 1-hour pre-show. We had a 3-hour-long main show. And still at the end, we actually did get standing ovation. So maybe they were leaving, but we like to think that it was standing ovation. So later on tonight, if you want to make me feel good, and then in the 20-year retrospective, I can tell the story. Well, I did this 10-year show, and then they standing ovation. Yeah, that's why I juggle instead of comedy. Okay, this next piece, it's a bit, again, what do I pick from a 4-hour-long show? Okay, what fits in my van? To drive here and show you. Also around that time, 1998, I was traveling to Europe more and more, and we were talking about art a lot, and we had heard some rumors about Michael Motion, about how Michael Motion had created his crystal ball piece. And the rumor that we heard is that his pet rat had died, or his gerbil or something like this, and he was very upset, and he went into the woods crying alone for 2 or 3 months with no food, and had some crystal balls and was doing this. Which, in one way, wasn't so far from the truth, but the little details changed. some of the details of the story changed, and then it was I found out later, about 5 years later, I heard it from Michael himself, that actually it was his sister who was dying, not the gerbil, and he did have food in the woods, and like this, yes, I know it's quite strange, but, we're not here tonight to talk about him, but anyway, just so you know, that he said that the crystal ball, that the reason that, because his sister was dying and that he didn't want to ever close his hand around it, that the ball represented life, and so then he developed this technique to keep the ball open, to not close his hand around life all the time, which I think is quite interesting, that he translated this very specific image into a very concrete technique, which the audience certainly doesn't necessarily know. You watch the movie Labyrinth and you don't see David Bowie like, oh, my sister's dead, but you do see something that's very striking, a very striking technique. So that's the segue into this next little piece. What a segue it was. Basically what happened is also in 1998 my grandfather passed away, and not in any sort of big dramatic concrete pretentious way. I didn't want it to be such a big deal, but I thought, okay, well, I want to kind of do a piece about this, and then every time I do the piece, at least I'll remember him, or like this. And it wasn't such a big dramatic thing, but what I did try to do was translate some of my habits and my relationships with my grandfather into the piece, and certainly not that anybody in the world would ever know that. This is the first time I've ever told the story to anybody, if you've ever seen the piece, which you haven't, because I only did it 2 times. But but now you know it's about my grandfather who is now dead, and some of my relationships, and again, I don't want to sit here and all the details of the thought into the piece, because that's not the point, but the point was to create a piece. Some things I can say is that, for example, whenever I see my grandfather, he would always give me a $20 bill, and I don't know if that's because he thought I was a poor, out-of-work juggler, which it really could have been. So every time he saw me, he'd give me $20, and also he was a farmer, and I grew up on a farm, and so he had a very simple relationship to art, shall we say, which I think in one way was really interesting and good, and certainly in my history. So this next piece is, it's about my grandfather, and there's some music to it, so we'll see if this is all working here. special thanks tonight to the sound technician, it's Jay. Oh, thanks. Okay. That was from 1998, joke. But now I want to talk about 1999. So, I have to do a little Mr. Rogers thing here. Guess that shows you how old I am. Mr. Rogers. Wes. Okay. So Jerry Martin from Minneapolis, he's a great friend of mine, and he was part of the collective from the very beginning, and he said a really funny thing in 1999 about me. He said that, because, I don't know, there was some discussion and people were saying, oh, you know, Jay, he has such great ideas, you know, he has all these good ideas. And Jerry said, no, he doesn't. He said that the ratio of good ideas to bad ideas that Jay has, it's the same as everybody else. It's just that he has more ideas than normal. And I have to really agree with that. Again, going back and looking at all these old videotapes, I don't think I would have found the good things if I didn't do the bad things. So, I did a show in 1999 called Idea Ratio. And it's it's definitely the only long-form work that I've done that was trying to be completely narrative or concrete. So for example, that I just... Oh, okay. Man, now my joke about the sound technician doesn't even work, because it's actually you, and then Thanks a lot. Big round of applause for the real... All right, so Idea Ratio. Yeah, it was an hour-long play. I actually had a really thick script for it, and there was 8 actors in it, and they all had parts, and it was supposed to be concrete, as opposed to the piece you just saw. Again, I don't really ever care that you know it's about my grandfather. That's not what's important to me. The important thing was just the creation of the piece, and that it exists, and then you can watch it and be really bored by 4 club juggling or like it. I don't know. But with Idea Ratio, it was more concrete. As okay, now I'm going to sit down and I'm going to actually express something to an audience with juggling, something besides love. I think that was my first great attempt. I think when you discover art and you're young and a little bit naive, and then you're sitting there and you're like, yes, I'm going to do work about love and time and big concepts. That it's really completely even more random than this segue. So also in 1999, I joined the Gandini juggling project, as it was called back then. And we did a show called Remembering Rastelli. And those were the only 2 shows I did that year. I did Idea Ratio and Remembering Rastelli. And so this next piece is a little sketch of an idea from Idea Ratio that I later on developed for other shows. And it came out of some drawings that I did from Blink, the company with Fritz and Morty. Some drawings I had for costumes and also some set design. And also in 2004, we did a little Flying While Linda's Family in the IJA public show in Buffalo that was vaguely inspired by this piece. Tomoko from Japan really liked this piece, and she wanted to make her own version of it, and it was simply brilliant. So I did this piece on the side, very far away, and she was in the middle doing very nice things. But yeah, this is from 1999. Anybody know any music from 99 that was big? Anybody remember anything?
Party like it's 1999.
Thank you for coming tonight. It's true, it was on New Year's Eve, right? Everybody played that one, okay.
This is the love.
Excited.
Okay, well, thanks a lot. 2000, the year 2000. I did a show at the 531 Festival of New and Experimental Juggling in Helsinki, Finland. And the show was called Insinuation and the Ghost of Jake Gilligan's Former Self. Because it's funny to say that in Finnish. Actually. But when I went to, this was my first appearance at 531 and my first broader experience to my own personal work. It was a 2-hour long show, and it really influenced, really influenced a lot of people in the way that they watched my show and they said, "What the hell are you doing?" I went there and all of the people from France just couldn't believe I was on stage doing things like that. Because first of all, the pieces were like 5 minutes long, and I didn't have a costume, and where was my musician, and there was no accordions playing, and I didn't use white silicone balls, and I had shoes on, and seriously. So that was actually a really funny thing, because ever since I started going to Europe, of course, it really influenced my work. And then I arrive in Europe and I'm quite naive and things like this about art and what is possible. And actually that show really opened some people's eyes in Europe that, well, wait a second, I can actually make a show without $10,000 budget, and I can actually do things that I like to do on stage instead of what I think I should do. And so that was really nice for me. Of course, at the same time, I was being very heavily influenced by all the work over there, but that was kind of a funny little exchange that all the French people just had no idea what was going on or why I existed. It was kind of nice. But actually, like I said, I started out unicycling when I was the age of 8, and even when you're 8 years old in unicycling, you kind of, in unicycle world, you compete all the time. So you make these little competitions, and everybody makes a 3-minute long piece, and you show them to a room full of judges, and they judge you. It's like, I don't know, baton twirling or something like this. And so even from the age of 8, I was making routines, so it was kind of natural to me. And also in this style, a 3-minute routine. Okay, what trick do I do next? What do I do next? And then there's an ending. And I remember the first routine I made when I was 8 years old was I could do 2 tricks. I could get on, and I could ride. And the first one was really important, because when I fell off, I could get on. Gave me the edge, gave me the edge. And, but one thing I could do, since I could ride in a circle, is I had a piñata that I think my brother held on a stick. And then I had a stick and I would ride by and take swings at it until it took about 3 minutes, it was a good length. But then my clincher, the one that really got me the title of 8-year-old boy's unicycle champion for small people this high, was that when I broke the piñata, then the candy that came out, I gave it to the judges. So I was quite proud of myself for that when I was 8. But the point of the story being that, yeah, even from an early age, I was trying to make work that was kind of a little bit outside the box of what you're supposed to do, or trying to cheat the system. Since I had no skills, I had to do it in another way, or at least open people's eyes and make them look at me in a different way, which has definitely been a huge theme of all the work since then. So this next routine has a little bit to do with that. That year, the year 2000, I went to Disneyland with my family. We had a really good time. And in fact, I think it was New Year's Eve, the year 2000, we were at Disneyland. And we took the Jungle Boat ride, cruise, what is it, riverboat cruise? Anybody been to Disneyland? Yeah. Cool. Well, it was the last boat of the evening. And since you've never been there, I have to recreate this for you. They have these little animatronic monkeys and pirate skeletons that kind of jump out at your boat, and they have some fire shooting out, you know, a good half mile away, and like things like this. And you're floating in a little car that's driving in water, like 2 inches deep. And the thing is, the leader of the tour boat, the riverboat, he has a microphone. And he also has a fake gun, and he has a script, which is the great part, he has a script. And so it was the last ride of the evening, New Year's Eve 2000. And you know this guy, you could just tell he didn't want to be alive, or at least he didn't want to be there alive. He would rather be anywhere else in the world but doing this. And so he just had the best. It could not have been better. I could not have enjoyed it better. And coming up on your right, you'll see the leopards. Please watch out for the leopards. Oh no, there they go. Bang, bang. Oh, that was so scary. And coming up on your left, we have the monkeys. They're about to attack. Watch out for the monkeys. And enjoy the ride. Steps to your left. Please keep your arms in at all times. Like this, just completely gone. And this was super interesting to me because I mean, to be fair, the script was horrible and the ride wasn't that entertaining, but his delivery made it extra entertaining. No, not on purpose, but I got my money's worth. So I decided I would make a routine that I would make the routine inherently boring, that I would hate the routine. And then when I was on stage, I would have to entertain myself, and this would also entertain the audience, I hoped. Turned out okay. So this is going to be that piece. It's called Disneyland. And the material, the technique for the piece was taken a little bit, the collective did a scarf juggling piece in the Mondo public show of 1997 with John Popley, Ocean Kalin, John Rouser, and myself. And we had a really funny little four-person scarf routine. Scarves, totally underused prop. We're gonna bring them back. I can't wait till Babash comes out with the tiny scarves. Then we have the different size scarves. Okay. So yes, Disneyland. So you can just imagine how exciting it was when I made it up. Yeah, so in '99 I made my first narrative show. Then in 2001 I made my first comedy show. Intentional comedy. It was supposed to be intentional comedy. Anyway, and it was called Roller Coaster Fun. And there was a show at a theater called the Bryan Lake Bowl in Minneapolis. And they had, Bryan Lake, bowling. That was for bowling. All right, thanks. So they had canceled the show due to bad attendance. So they asked me to fill in. And so I had this really great idea that I'm going to do a comedy show, and the premise is going to be that I'm late to the show. And so the first 10 minutes of the show, just, nothing happened. The stage was empty. And then I would come running in my coat with my suitcase. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm late, my car broke down. I had this really good story. It was better than the car breaking down, really funny. But no, yeah, and but the point of the story I want to get to is that, and I'm not joking, every week I came in to do the show, the manager of the theater would say, Jay, come on. It was like the second week, you're late now. So that's so much for my comedy show. That was my good concrete narrative show. Thanks a lot. All this should be coming out in the next 22 DVD set, which should have been out this year, but maybe I don't know when. But yeah, Roller Coaster Fun. So this next piece also, like I said before, Jerry Martin, he had this idea ratio comment, which I thought was really nice. And this next shape I'm going to use is also from Jerry Martin's notebook. He had a drawing of a bunch of things, and this was one of them. And in the original version, there were lights inside all of the ends. And I've never done that one yet. But we made a piece with this in 1997 with 3 people for the show Farrago, which was by The Collective. And then I did a piece in question with 3 people and blah, blah, blah. But I made a solo version for my show at 531, the Festival of New and Experimental Juggling, in the year 2001, and the show was called Skeleton Key. So this is from Skeleton Key.
Put
like a dinosaur. Feel into monstrous strains of a doubt, but it's a dinosaur.
Thank you very much. All right. Wow. 2002, I did a show called Building Weight, which I took the name from a friend of Michael Motion's. And Michael Motion had a friend who was a shipbuilder who turned into an architect. And the first building he ever designed, he asked the client, well, how much should the building weigh? And then the client said, what in the world are you talking about? He said, well, I'm a shipbuilder, and when we're building ships, that's the first question you ask, is how much is the ship going to carry, or how much is it going to weigh? And then I can build it so it's structurally sound. And I found this a really interesting story, basically, that he's looking at, he's looking at building buildings in a different way than you normally would. So I wanted to take some juggling technique and make a show in which I was so precise about the technique, I had to know how much the building would weigh. And so I called the show Building Weight. And the show was basically a piece of technique that went from point A to point B, and anytime there was a meeting of the technique in the middle, there would be a little piece of that. So for example, if I had a piece with balls, and the next thing I was going to do was rings, I would do a little piece with balls and rings. That was, again, a very simple concept to come out of that. And also, that same year, 2002, we had a little show called Cirque d'été, and this was also trying to do the same thing, where you have the link between, let's say, a ball piece of juggling and a ring piece of juggling, so we make a little ball and ring piece. We did the same thing with music and juggling. So there were 4 cast members, and one was just a musician, and one was just a juggler, and then we had a musician who did a little juggling, and a juggler who did a little music. And we made a show like this on 4 little meter square platforms that we never left, which was also kind of fun. But the next piece I'd like to do is from Building Weight, in fact. And I came up with this piece when I was teaching in a circus school in Finland, in Turku. And I do a lot of teaching in circus schools, and one of the exercises I had given the students was to go somewhere in the building and make a site-specific piece. So for example, maybe you're against a wall and you're bouncing things off a wall or whatnot. And in the gymnasium where the circus school was practicing, they had these gymnastic bars on the wall, the kind of grids of bars, and you do chin-ups and pull-ups and things I don't know the name of because I never do that. So we have this wood against the wall, and I could set balls on it and roll the balls back and forth. And I thought, well, that's really nice. And now I have to build something I carry around that can do the same thing. So yeah, this is from Building Weight. It's from teaching exercise. Thanks a lot. This next year was 2003. It was the year after I was in company Jérôme Thomas. Who went to Portland? Yeah, company Jérôme Thomas. Can I? No? No? Yeah? No? Okay. Yeah. So I was in a show by Jérôme Thomas called Milk Day, and in 2002, and in 2003, I made a show called Tonight You Are in Pittsburgh, which was, I was playing the International Children's Festival here with, you were there. It's great that you went, thank you. And it was with Hordilerut, a dance theater company from Helsinki, and I forget where the show was, but it was kind of it was at a school. Yeah, and there was a piece of tape on the wing that said in bright, big yellow letters, "Tonight you are in Pittsburgh." I mean, and I couldn't comprehend who would be playing this theater, and they wouldn't know where they were. I mean, this is me would find in Las Vegas, I guess, or I don't know what, but you walk on and, "Hello, Philadelphia, can I?" I mean, what prompted this piece of tape on the floor? I don't know. But it was really interesting to me. I was touring a lot, and I found this idea really funny that you wouldn't know where you were. And so I made a show called Tonight You Are in Pittsburgh, and the original concept, it played for 8 nights in an art gallery in Minneapolis. And every night of the 8 nights, there would be 4 musicians who have never met each other and have never met me. I just called them on the phone. And so we did 8 nights of shows like this, and it was obviously improvisation. And this got back from when I was in dance school and I was doing a lot of improv and trying to improvise with juggling. And also it was kind of a reaction against Jérôme Thomas' company about what he thought was improvisation and what we had to do on stage in France every night. And just so you would know, every night on Milk Day, I would walk on stage the beginning of the show, and this actually happened on the premiere in Paris, the Malakoff, the biggest theater in Paris. I walked on stage and I had to say this in a microphone, and in English I had to say, "This is not a show," which could kind of give you an idea of what was going to happen for the next hour. And then the most brilliant thing was on the premiere, a nice old lady in the back of the room said, "En français!" In French. So it was a really great premiere. Like, we started off with a bang. It was really fun. So this show, this piece I'm going to do is from a show called Tonight We Were in Pittsburgh. It was a little bit of a reaction to this time of my life of art in Europe and what is that? Yes, that was good. And in fact, it's such a great piece. We're going to use a blackout for this one. So thank you very much. And go.
There's something about your love that only I cannot explain. With all the angels outside, let the devil and when I find out what it is, suppose that I'll lay down only to spend my day at the above you. Memory never serves, you see it straight ahead if you can. Eventually it swerves and leaves you standing there with an empty leash in your hand. Everything up to this point told me I'd be far away somewhere I am. 'Cause everything is turned away. Every hand is closed, but waves that I see are just my favorite memory. Presences and unlikely fall hides itself deep inside my chest, shows itself just to let me know what I am is really in my bed. I thought you could set me straight. Every thought destroys itself. Every voice is someone else. I guess you help me understand. What could happen by
Thank you. Dario on Dexy. Lights please. Lights. Thank you, Philadelphia. You're great. All right. Coming to the end. In 2003, I got commissioned to make a new show in Nuit et Jonglage in Rennes in France, Night of Juggling. And I wanted to try to compose a show the way that a group could make a show. So in a group, when you have a group of people on stage, I can juggle the rings while Wes goes and gets the clubs, and then Joe goes and gets the scarves while Wes is juggling the clubs, and like this. But when you're a solo juggler, you generally don't have the opportunity. And I wanted to try to make a solo work that could be composed in this way. And so I made a piece called Nouveau Nouveau, kind of a little joke on jonglage nouveau, like new juggling, jonglage nouveau. So the new, I don't know what, but it was funny in French. And I did the show in 2003 and I didn't videotape it, and I didn't write it down. And in 2004, I was asked to do the show again and I couldn't remember it at all. And so I made the show again from nothing. I remembered absolutely nothing of the show. And so I called it the Nouveau Nouveau Remix. And the show took its seed from this idea of, from building weight, where if you have a ball piece and a ring piece, then you do a ball and a ring piece. And hopefully in this way, the juggling would never stop, that the juggling would always be continuing and evolving, and whenever there was a meeting point of technique. But to actually do this for real, building weight didn't succeed in that so well. And so Nouveau Nouveau and Nouveau Remix was a attempt to do this kind of technique composition game. And the piece I want to do now, it's from the 2004 version, it's from the remix, and it's the second kind of starting point I made from the balls, after the balls and rings piece that I had made before for building weight. And again, this is kind of random because it's inside of a 45-minute long piece, but then we just pulled it out, this little piece of technique. But this is balls and clubs.
Been speaking I used to be, but now I'm older than I used to be. And love is hard.
Thanks. All right. 2005. I only did two new shows that year. One I directed. It was in Sweden. It was called Tokyo. And it was with 15 of my circus students who I've been teaching in Sweden since the year 2000. So this is some students I've been working with for a long time. And we made a really big show called Tokyo, and if you want a copy of it on DVD, you just ask me later on tonight, and I will give you one. But it was it had lots of things besides juggling in it, acrobatics and trampoline and trapeze and things like this. And so it was hard to do something from there tonight. And then also the other show I was in 2005 was Les Sept Doigts de la Main, the 7 Fingers of the Hand from Montreal. And so I did a piece from that show last week in New York City, so you missed it. So 2006, because that piece was a duet. But I'll show you my solo from the show. The only thing is that it's a bit of a lie. It's from building weight, and it's the balls and rings I keep talking about. But the only thing I can say is that in 2005, I performed the piece 235 times in Berlin. And so, of course, over the course of so many shows, it evolved into something completely different than from building weight. And so, you think I'm joking, but if I can remember it, I will show you the piece, even though I did it 235 times, but I will try to remember it. And the music I use for this piece, it's also the music you've been hearing. It's by Robert Scoro, who's from Minneapolis, and he's a musician I worked with for many years. And I actually got to use this piece of music in Berlin, so here goes nothing.
In the beginning, we were full of ideas. We were talking it out instead of keeping it real. It was a palace made of paper mache. It got thicker and thicker as we were adding it on. I gave it powers of garden. Made it look so pretty instead of making it strong. We kept ourselves in the moment. We didn't ask for it. We were dreaming. Some people thinking of building. We should start with the cellar. Maybe leave the roads. Our buckets are fuller. Keep it strong, keep it simple. Make it airtight. If you fail, then start over with whatever is right. It seems only see how everything falls out and put to the test. You can take what you want, like you can leave what you choose. If you're dreaming of nothing, you got nothing to lose. So I'm walking around with my bag full of hearts, and I'm looking for someone with some rulers and charts who maybe is looking to build something new. Maybe out in the country where we won't need that long, we'll have acres and acres and some fish in the pond. No more rain, no more salvage, and no more wandering around. It's what I'm dreaming about. In this house together. Shape it as we please. 'Cause I don't need power. I'm dreaming of nothing. Are you dreaming of me? I'm dreaming of you.
Thank you guys so much. I still, even though we started off doing things like Britney Spears music and no costume, it still kills me when I drop, because I think that's the one thing a juggler should do, is not drop. So I'm very sorry. It's nice to talk and to tell you I'm sorry. Normally, yeah. I'm sorry for dropping. And it kills me 235 times and I still drop. It's the life of a juggler. It's so hard. All right. Coming 2006, last year, Denis Pommier had made a ring piece that was 13 minutes long. It just with circles a couple years ago, and he used 3 different size rings. And this is very interesting for me because Mr. Babash, which is a juggling manufacturer, they started selling rings that were at the same time bigger than this and then smaller than this. Not the same ring, but different ones. One was bigger, one was smaller. And this incidentally sparked a whole new realm of creativity, of technique. I mean, just because Mr. Babash wanted to cash in on the youth of today for juggling with small rings. So I think it's really funny and quite random that this technique exists. Denis Pommier made a piece in his original ring show. Oscar made one in 9-to-1 DVD. And so a lot of people, when Mr. Babash started selling these rings, they went out and bought them. And most people didn't do anything about it, but I decided to try to make a piece with 3 different size rings, which I composed during the Shoebox tour last year on the road. So thank you so much, those who came to Shoebox, and hopefully this is the finished piece now. It kind of evolved on that tour, which was really fun to choreograph it differently every night, but I hope hopefully this is it with the different size rings. And also, we are doing Shoebox Tour 2007 in August, and we're coming to Pittsburgh, among other places. So if you liked Shoebox last year, we're coming back this year, and we're bringing some special guests from, well, I can't really say, but from Japan. And I'll let you know about it. But Shoebox 2007 in August, and this is from Shoebox 2006.